have now. And you're really only having conversations that with someone that you are intentionally making the effort to, and you can do that globally, instantly, which is also nice. But you're just missing that serendipity of like running into someone, those unexpected moments.
No, and all of that is nice. I want to definitely be able to do that again. But the time working on art with a lot of time to focus uninterrupted it's been very therapeutic for me. And I realize that that's probably when I'm my happiest, is when time just disappears. I'm working on solving a visual and maybe conceptual problem, and I can just really be in it. And that can be a joyful process, and in some ways a frustrating process, but it's what gives life meaning in a lot of ways for me, is expressing myself that way. So all the other things that I need to figure out how to do in order to make it so that I can earn my living that way are necessary. But what I realized was sometimes I was favoring those other things out of a sense of obligation, rather than focusing more on what I think is the best use of my time, and something that I get a lot of joy out of. And end product, I think I can put the spotlight on issues I care about. I can raise money for things. So there's this dichotomy with it that I think makes it for sure the best use of my time, in terms of how I can put something into the world that I hope is pushing things in the right direction, and how I can feel good about what I'm doing.
For sure. How has that new mentality or freeing, like, how has that specifically affected your art? Did it, and also, like, I guess to give a second parts like that, like, has the constant narrative of it changed throughout or the constantly changing narrative of it change your approach as you've been going through it?
Well, one thing is I've always tried to be, since I outgrew being like a selfish kid, I've always tried to be sensitive to things that, people struggle with, and whether that's, racism, sexism, xenophobia, financial issues, like looking out, trying to use my art to look out for vulnerable people. COVID is kind of, in some ways, something that everybody's impacted by, but some people disproportionately. So sure. I started off doing some fundraising prints that would then the money would go directly to the people that needed it the most, like the Mayor's Fund, where they're really looking out for people. And then my wife and I donated to a big fund for that where artists can apply to get some relief. And then I made some images that were really just designed to raise morale, because a lot of times when there's an unknown thing that creates fear, like COVID, just the feeling of going, that you're not going through it alone, that there is hope, and that there's a shared mission, I think can really make a difference. How you feel psychologically impacts how you feel physically. It's well documented. So
for sure,
it is around on that. But then of course I'm always making my images around other things too, like climate change. And I recently I did a couple installations in Hollywood around race. I've been creating images about police brutality and racism for 30 years. So right. It's not a new thing for me, but I think it's really important to show solidarity right now. So I did a couple of installations on the street and have shown some of my work and talked about it, but I've also hosted some content from friends who are Black, who I think they deserve center stage in terms of the conversation. So it's like I'm always there to say, hey, I'm an ally, but I also don't want to look like the white guy trying to steal the mic.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, to that point, like, for other artists that want to support in this moment, like, what are some maybe like good tips to like help anyone that wants to like be out there?
Well, I've been telling people that there are several organizations that do really great work, and yeah, you can put hashtag BLM and whatever, but if you really want to help people doing the work on the front lines, people that do stuff in communities and within the political system, you
Right.
can support Black Lives Matter, the Equal Justice Initiative, hashtag Cut 50 for their work on incarceration reform, the Southern Poverty Law Center. I've also donated to, I can't remember the name of his organization, but Colin Kaepernick's organization, because they're all doing good work, and I think that everybody can do stuff on social media, and it's great to show your support verbally, because to just show that there's there's no room for racism by making sure that people are not only being tolerant passively, but anti-racist actively. That's
Right.
important. But I think also, I've been talking to a lot of my Black friends and saying, like, what do you think? And it's not like Black people are one, monolithic group. There's a lot of different opinions about what's going on. And I think that having that real conversation with people, and and not sort of just talking in platitudes, but getting into the difficult things to talk about is great. But a ton of people, like, I've been watching how Trevor Noah's been dealing with it, and that guy is smart. And I just watched Dave Chappelle's thing today.
So
It's all
powerful.
progress. I want to be educated.
Yeah, same. And and more often than like not, in these moments, and sometimes it's good just to listen, just to
Right.
be there.
Yeah.
But I mean, but you're in a unique position, being someone who has been very vocal about these issues for a long time, and has this art that kind of is elevated on a platform where people see it and look at it and push. And like, do you feel like there's like a I guess a place for like yourself and other artists that want to support this in this moment? Or is it more just like, I've done it, I'm here to like open the like doors, and I'll be here when you need me?
One of the things that we in our studio have been talking about, and we have a very diverse group, Black, Latino, Asian, gay, straight, but we and we've shown a lot of Black artists in our gallery, but we all realize that we haven't been active enough about making sure that the racial disparities in the art world and the design world and a lot of other zones are not just things that we're trying to fix when it's convenient, but even when it's inconvenient, we need to try to fix those things. And I think that's the conversation that a lot of people have been having because when you're privileged, the idea that you're not discriminating against anyone can often seem like enough. But actually, if you really want to be progressive, it's more to, actively try to correct for historical injustice rather than not just continuing to perpetuate it.
Yeah.
And that's not always easy. But yeah, I mean, these are conversations that we're having with everybody, and I think that awareness of it is always really important. And I think that that's all you can ask, is for people to be sensitive, and and just have their eyes open for how to solve things. But one of the things we talked about was a lot of interns come to us from affluent families that are kids of friends that we know through all of our art world connections or design world connections. And so they tend to mostly be not all white, but we need to go and reach out to some of these programs. For example, when I did a mural at the Maya Angelou School, I met some of the kids from the art class there, and I thought, man, I should bring some of these guys and gals in to do internships. But then I just never followed up on it, even though they were rap, because I'm busy. But like pushing it further and making sure that I actually do it.
Yeah. I mean, most great art doesn't come from kids from rich parents anyways. It's like it's like, if you want to get to the meat of where society is, you just need to look, and like dig around to the to the places that maybe aren't as natural. Like I feel like, it's easy when you're in the business or art world, or you're like digging into or growing into different echelons, you kind of get walled in, and it's hard to always have that contact of just reaching out outside of your like first wall, or like two of like friends. But like, like here at IHC, we've always just kind of tried to have a like blanket policy of like, good is good. Like, it doesn't matter if they're well known or like not, or what their race or sex or like anything is. If it's good, we're going to get behind it and support it. And I feel like that attitude, maybe for like better or for worse, has maybe kept us from being like superstars. But it's also like, I can look back at the legacy of artists and say, okay, like all these people really mattered, and mattered to like us, and like went on to do great stuff. Now, that's not to say that like we don't have work to like do and things to like, and ways to like grow too. I mean, like we've always had a diverse staff, but we don't currently have like one Black person on payroll. I mean, there's 5 of us, so it's not a big group.
Right.
We have, and we will, and we have a ton of freelance people who we work with all the time, who are, but like, it's like, you're right. It has to be constant work. You have to constantly be paying attention to it. And I think that, this is potentially a nice transition to my next kind of subject, is that it's an election year too.
Yeah.
So all these things are going on and building to kind of this huge moment. And so, you're someone who's kind of been through this process a few times, probably uh, closer than like most. So like, how can we turn this energy and momentum into like real change institutionally?
Well, using the streets to express beliefs is very important. I mean, when I talk about democracy, I don't just mean, one person, one vote. I actually mean finding a way to participate civically using every tool you have. And that's, you can be through art, through music, through writing, through protesting, through community groups, and through voting. But when I hear people say, well, the system doesn't work, so why vote at all? But I'll go out in the street. The politicians don't listen unless they think the streets got follow through.
For sure.
So if they go, young people, yeah, they go out and they protest, but then they don't show up at the polls, they know that they're insulated from actually having to make systemic change to respond to those demands from protesters. So it's gotta be both. And I'm frustrated by the two-party system. I'm frustrated by the campaign finance structure that allows special interest groups and powerful corporations to have a disproportionate influence. But I know that if there's higher voter turnout, that the politicians will be much more responsive to the demands of the people. I mean, right now, voter turnout is very low. It's usually 60% of the people who are eligible to vote or less. I mean, that's like almost half the population isn't participating.
Right.
And they know that of that 60%, that a large percentage is people who might make campaign donations or at least have the system rigged in their favor. Then those are the people they're going to make policies for. So everybody has to vote. And then voter suppression is a really big problem. So I'm trying to put the spotlight on a lot of these things and make people understand that, democracy might not be perfect, but it's what we have. And if we had a much higher voter turnout percentage, you would see some shift in the way politicians behave very quickly, because
radically, yeah.
They believe in self-preservation.
For sure.
They know they'll be gone if they don't respond to the people if voter turnout is higher. Because if voter turnout is high, all the gerrymandering and all the trying to just cater to the powerful will not serve them well. So I'm frustrated that Joe Biden's the nominee. He wasn't my first choice, but he's actually somebody that has worked on some policies that that have been progressive at the time. I mean, stuff on the environment, he was early on that. I mean, marriage equality, healthcare reform. When you look at Trump and Biden, there's no comparison. And so, the idea that, you didn't get Bernie or you didn't get Elizabeth Warren or whoever, so you're not going to vote. That just means that you might be handing the election to the worst president we might have ever had, who's got no one's interest other than him and his rich friends in mind. So my wife and I have a little voter info site. It's a org called Make America Smart Again. A little jab at Trump, but it's dumbisovermasa.com. And that's playing off of war is over if you want it, dumb is over if you want it.
Right.
And that's really, it's not that all Americans are dumb. It's that a lot of Americans don't invest the time to actually understand the dynamics of the issues that impact them. And so they can't make a smart choice when they vote. And that applies not just to the presidency, but the congressional races, the local races appointed for, you know, the judges, the sheriffs, you know, chief of police. All of those things matter. And so we're trying to provide some resources to people so that they can make a choice that's good for them. I'm not telling anyone how to vote, but I at least want them to be able to vote in their own interest, and maybe in the interest of some of the people who are most vulnerable under you know, the brutality we're facing right now.
I mean, one of the things that I think is actually is another plus to the quarantine, just to even wrap back around to the whole music thing, is I think people have time to pay attention to this kind of stuff more. And it seems like for better, for worse, that freedom allowed people to be so much more invigorated and so supportive in these last couple weeks. You kind of see the government scrambling to get everything open now. We got to get these people off the streets, but that's not going to work for the long term, because COVID's still out there. So
Right.
I think it's a unique moment, given that it's an election year, to where, you know, people are paying attention more, because they can physically feel the effects of who's in charge, like what the rules are, or like, and that's so different from being able to be distracted by music festivals and sports games and new movies. Like, we don't have any of that shit. So you're really focused on, like, what's my neighbor like, what's my grocery store like.
And I think that it's been one of the first times in my life that I've seen that people had a fear about their own safety, which also they could understand everyone else was feeling that same fear, where when you know, that creates empathy. Then there's also that sense for a lot of people, not for everyone. There's some assholes who are like, oh, I'm going to be reckless and you know, and screw it, you know. But a lot of people are, you know, will wear a mask and make sacrifices, not because they feel they're especially vulnerable, but because they want to be responsible to the people that are vulnerable. And you know, that's the kind of thinking that we're going to need to tackle big things like climate change, where it can't be motivated selfishly. People have to think about how you know, small collective sacrifice can actually make huge global impact. And so I think the sensitivity to that also meant that people were maybe more, maybe a little bit more compassionate and a little more sensitive, watching someone face an injustice like George Floyd, and not being as busy meant that everyone could simultaneously focus on that. I think perpetual distraction allows really vile forces to get away with things.
For sure.
And you know, it was the perfect storm of things that I think meant that they weren't going to get away with it this time. And the other thing I think is that most people don't like to witness injustice. And maybe if they don't, even if they lash out, the cumulative effect of seeing a lot of that stuff means that eventually it's going to click. And, you know, I know a lot of people have been trying to say, you know, wake up to this police brutality and this injustice, and they're pushing. And I've many times felt like some of the pieces I've made about racial bias that sort of, you know, seem to fall on deaf ears. Maybe all that time, like trying to loosen a jar and you can't get it, and you hand it to the next person and they just pop it right off. It's like, but you couldn't see it, but I loosened it, you know? You know, I feel like we're having one of those moments, and it's incredibly inspiring to see it, because unlike a lot of the other protests about racial injustice, the crowds are predominantly young, but of all ages and of every background, every ethnicity, every economic tier. You don't see that kind of unity around much, and that, I mean, that means there's a mandate for change, and that they can resist it for a little while, but if the pressure keeps like it has been, which I think it's essential to have that carry through the election.
For sure.
Yeah, we got to keep pushing, but it's going to happen. And nothing makes me happier than seeing that process unfolding.
Same. Like you said it right. We got to keep the pressure up. We got to push it through November. If we see that kind of energy, then we'll have a huge change. And please, after the last 4 years, we definitely need it. We don't have much time left, and we had a few fan questions. So let me get those through. We have 4 that we picked. One is, are you finding it harder to be inspired during quarantine?
No. And probably because I'm inspired by a lot of different things, but I collect a lot of books, and I've been reading books like you all know Harari's 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. He's the guy that wrote Sapiens.
Yeah.
The book's a couple years old, but I just hadn't gotten to it yet because I'm always so busy. There are a lot of great ideas in that book. I've been listening to a lot of music. I get a lot of ideas and inspiration from music. I just read a shorter book called On Tyranny, which is a really great book examining things like fascism from the 20th century and how that crept up on people and how analogous that is to what we're going through now, that scapegoating and nationalism. So I have a lot of inspiration just from some of the things I've read. I've also read Flea's book. I read which I'm not even a huge Red Hot Chili Peppers fan, but Flea is just an awesome guy. So I get inspiration from things that are more more about social theory, and then things that are just about how to live a fearless and sometimes crazy life. All of that. I'm kind of a mix of all those things. But and then of course there's a ton of good stuff on cable, TV shows, and
which
documentaries.
Which shows have you been watching?
Well, I always watch Last Week Tonight with John Oliver and Bill Maher. I loved Watchmen. I thought Watchmen was really great. And that had an anti racism component to it, which was pretty fascinating for where we are now.
If you like records, you should buy the 3 vinyl soundtrack records for the Watchmen series. Each record is designed to be an in-world album. It's the Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross soundtrack, but the artwork is 3. One is a band that's in world, that is a like a 90s grunge band that wrote a concept record inspired by Rorschach's Journal. One is a soundtrack to the show, the American crime story or American hero story. So it's a soundtrack to like that. And the third one is a 9 Inch Nails record that only existed in the continuity of the Watchmen universe, that is inspired by Dr. Manhattan. All 3 of these albums have artwork, stories, like they're fully in world in the show. And if you read all of it, it enhances everything that you see in the show. Plus you get all that sick music.
Nice. All right. I'm going to have to grab that.
Yeah, they're all super sick.
About it. So awesome.
Next fan question. Do you have any advice for aspiring artists and / when did you start creating art?
Well, I started drawing a lot when I was a really little kid. But my first memory of sort of thinking about art as, as something that you shared with people and maybe, maybe tried to flex with, was when I was about 4. I went over to a friend's house and his mom had a whole fridge gallery set up with like his drawings of firefighters putting out fires and, characters from Star Trek. And she was really bragging on it. And I was like, I got to go home and make a better fridge gallery. I've always, I'm very gentle now, but I've always been a bit competitive. So,
Right.
but skateboarding and punk rock were really what got me into a lot of the art ideas that I have now, because, the art was like DIY, raw, frequently subversive. So whether it was what Raymond Pettibone did for Black Flag, or what Winston Smith did for the Dead Kennedys, or Jamie Reed did for the Sex Pistols, a lot of that art was influential for me. And then, Santa Cruz skateboards, Jim Phillips' work for them, Pusshead stuff for Zorlak. That was important to me. But I've always been sort of omnivorous. I mean, I'm inspired by pop artists like Warhol. I love Russian constructivist art. I love Barbara Kruger's art. Robbie Canal, the poster maker, was a huge influence for me. One of the reasons I wanted to do political posters for the street was because of him. But yeah, I mean, I just, it's the only thing I've ever been good at. I'm okay at DJing, and I was a decent skateboarder, but making visual art and graphic design, this is the only things that I was ever really good at. My parents said, we don't want you to go to art school. We want you to go to a liberal arts school so you have a more practical education. I said, look, art's the only thing I'm good at. It's the only thing I'm ever going to be able to make a living at. If I don't go to art school, I'm pretty much doomed to, have to live at your house for the rest of my life. And they thought about that and said, that doesn't sound fun. Let's let him go to art school.
Yeah. For those of you watching, if you haven't seen it, there's a really good documentary on Shepard on Hulu it's just called Obey, right?
Obey Giant.
Obey Giant, yes.
Came out
Do you like that doc?
Yeah. What'd you say?
Do you like that doc? Was that like, you're like, this is my doc, it's telling my story, or were you, I guess maybe that's a controversial question to ask.
No, it's not controversial. First of all, James Moll, the filmmaker, I think is an excellent filmmaker, but I told him from the beginning, you make the film that you want to make, but I think it's important that you really understand who I am. So he had my books, we had several conversations, and then he just dove in. And I had a lot of old archival footage that we gave him. He found stuff, he shot a lot of stuff, but and he's not a super emotional guy, cards to the vest. So I was nervous, but when he showed me a cut, I really understood that. I felt he understood me, and so that's good. But not everyone likes me. I'm a lightning rod, and I'm used to it, and I'm used to facing criticism. And when I saw the first cut of the film, I actually thought it was too nice. So I said, you need to, right at the front of the film, you need to put in a lot of the detractors' voices, because otherwise it seems like a bit of propaganda for me. And I don't want that. I don't want anyone thinking that I somehow had a hand in making, getting you to make a piece that was flattering. I want it to be both sides of the argument. And, I think that in the end, I come off fine. I avail my point of view pretty well, but it was important that at least the counter arguments were in there.
Yeah. Good answer. I will ask you one last fan question, and then I will let you go. What is the future of street art and art festivals, given everything that's going on?
Well, street art you know, I think if you go out and do stuff where you don't have to be around a lot of people, which that was most of my street art career,
Right.
staying as far away from people as possible, especially the cops. I think there's you could be doing that right now. As far as doing big murals, which I really love doing, I'm going to start doing that again, but it's going to mean that my assistants and I have to fly, and that's going to pose a little bit of a risk. But I think that, you know, once we're up on swing stages and you know, we're not down sidewalk level in the mix with people, I think that's pretty safe as well. And it's really, I was supposed to do a huge project collaboration with the ACLU throughout this whole spring and summer into the fall, into the election.
Oh, wow.
Doing murals in battleground states, which now that's been pared down a lot, but I'm still gonna be hitting North Carolina, Florida, Wisconsin, Michigan to do murals to encourage people to get out and vote. And but you know, I guess it has to do with everyone's level of comfort taking even calculated risks. To me, I've been arrested 18 times for doing street art, so there's I have less of a fear of COVID than I do of getting arrested and not being given my insulin while I'm in jail, which has happened a lot because I'm a type 1 diabetic.
Yeah.
So, you know, when I'm watching police brutality, and I've been beaten up by the cops a couple times, and, you know, I'm white, so I know that if I'm white and I actually am fairly well known and I'm treated like my life doesn't matter, imagine what a poor non-white person gets.
Yeah, for sure.
But sometimes when I try to explain to people who say like, oh, well, these people that get mistreated by the cops, it's because they resisted arrest or they did this or they did that. Say, no, I'm from the South. You know, shucks, y'all, I'm so polite. When I get arrested, I'm like, wow, officer, I'm really sorry. I really, you know, I didn't realize this was wrong. Let me cooperate. I'm so nice. And they still want to mess with you. There's a lot of sadists. There's some decent cops out there that I've dealt with too, and I have a few friends. Not saying, but there is a cancer within that culture that needs to be cut out. And yeah, there's really no other way to put it.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
What I'm saying is, if you do street art, don't worry about COVID as much as you're worrying about not getting caught.
For the ones that you're going to do now, like, is that, I guess, are those like legal spaces?
Yeah, they're legal spaces. I mean, after doing illegal stuff for 20 years, people started to say like, hey, I like that stuff I've seen on an electrical box here or a wall there. I have a building. Could you do something more permanent? And then I started painting murals instead of just wheat pasting installations and do quick stencils. And that's amazing. You know, a lot of people are advocates for street art, but it's the detractors usually control the conversation, but that's starting to shift. And yeah, I'm really happy about that. Some people say it's, oh, you know, street art's being declawed or whatever, but it's like, you can't declaw street art if you just go out and do it without permission. It's always going to be dangerous. It's always going to be punk rock. But
Sure.
that you can't also do things in a gallery or with the building owner's permission and have it be in you know, a multi-platform approach. That's how I look at it. My objective was always to democratize art and make sure that people didn't have to just go to a gallery or a museum to see art. And you know, I was willing to take risks for that, but years and years of taking risks meant also that I get a lot of opportunities, and there are opportunities that help serve the mission of reaching people with my art and also giving me the time to spend painting a mural that's more refined than I can do while I'm looking over my shoulder hoping the cops don't come.
For sure. Well, Shepard, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. Is there anything that you want to say as like parting words? Any projects you want to point out, or organizations to support?
My coworker Victoria, who you know, she's
Yeah.
always. I don't have an earpiece in, but she's like giving me some helpful reminders. Participating in the census, because
Yes.
that has a big impact on how funds are allocated and how districts are drawn. So if people participate in the census, then it's harder for people to draw districts in nefarious ways, and it just helps to make sure that everybody's counted. So that's a really important thing. All I'd say is vote. That's super crucial. Vote, and if you're an artist, follow your conscience. A lot of people I know who are really, really conscientious people who are artists, they worry about what the standards seem to be in the art world. The art world has it has a level of elitism that's meant to benefit dealers and benefit a system often more than to benefit the artists in ways. And so ultimately, the artists, though, that end up getting that breaking through, and the system has to accept them and embrace them, are the people who have a voice that connects with a lot of people. And so, I always say, don't listen to somebody whose theory is copy what's trending in the art world and restrict the supply of your work to increase the demand. Follow your heart, do what you feel is right, what's truly an honest representation of your vision, and ultimately that will give you the most satisfaction and give you the most potent work to share with the world.
Yeah, I always kind of feel like if you choose to lead, people will follow, almost always.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's always making a compelling picture and having persistence and tenacity that are important too. But yeah, there's that saying, good luck favors the well prepared. So keep pushing, and things will fall into place usually.
Definitely. Shepard, thank you so much. This has been awesome. This is actually my last Insta Live. Next week we'll be moving over to Twitch. So we have a whole new big plan and production studio that we're actually building back over here where my hand's pointing. And this has been amazing.
I'm glad I didn't get the slick version. I'm trying to keep it real, keep it my punk rock roots. I'm glad this was just DIY grimy. So thanks for that. It would have been embarrassing to be on it next week. So
well, I mean, to be honest, the first couple of weeks of the new version will probably be terrible, but it'll right itself out. But you should come back, because what's going to happen is not just one-on-one. It'll be like multiple people, and we can have a real conversation. So that'll be fun.
That would be great, man.
Thank you so much.
Well, always good to see you, Frankie.
You too.
All right.
Bye, Shepard.
Bye.